Well, welcome everyone. I do want to be sensitive of everyone's time. Welcome to our series of regional government services panels for leadership academies. And today's session is on repairing local agency systems that result in inequities. And we do have some great conversation that we hope is coming your way with today's panel. We really do want to talk about those systems that aren't always set up equitably, right? And with our panel today, hopefully we discuss the effective responses to those systemic inequities, and taking a look also at looking at new programs that might correct those imbalances, and maybe some ways that folks at whatever level and stage you are in your agency or organization, you may be able to glean some great understanding and get some good examples from the panelists that we have on with us today. So today we have with us Ryan Curran with Race Forward. We have Nancy Ducos with the City of Mountain View. And we have Jackie Guzman with the City of Sunnyvale. And so with that, let me clear out of the, all right. So thank you all for joining us today. It is a pleasure to see so much wealth of knowledge in one place about diversity and about inclusion, but we know it's not all about that, right? So I'm going to give you an opportunity to introduce yourselves and we'll get right into it. So Ryan?
Sure. Hey, thanks for having me. I'm Ryan Curran. I am the Director of Housing, Land, and Development at Race Forward, which is also the home to the Government Alliance on Race and Equity, which we'll get into a little later. I use he and him pronouns, and I am joining you from Portland, Oregon today. Pleasure to be here. Should I pass it to Jackie?
Hi, everyone. Jackie Guzman. I'm a Deputy City Manager in the City of Sunnyvale. We're the heart of Silicon Valley. We are a very diverse community with about 50% of our residents actually being immigrants, so being born outside of the United States. And super excited to be here to talk about our work around equity, access, and inclusion. I oversee the Office of Equity, Access, and Inclusion communications, as well as lots of different policy initiatives, and particularly community engagement policy initiatives. And I'll pass it to Nancy.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, all. My name is Nancy Ducos. I work for the City of Mountain View. My position is Senior Multilingual Program Coordinator with the City Manager's Office and within the Community Outreach Division. And I have been working for the city since like 10 years now. And as Jackie mentioned, our city is very diverse. And one of my other jobs is to make sure that we have language access so everybody can understand what we do, and in that way we can increase engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those introductions. So let's get right into it. I know folks really are looking to find out, what approaches they can take to help prevent or reduce some of those systemic inequities and those challenges in their own agencies. Jackie, what kind of approaches has your organization taken to address those? And if there are specific things that you can mention in terms of, where you're seeing some of those inequities, and then what prompted the agency to choose that approach?
All right, so I'm going to start then with a story. I have two stories that I want to tell you about Sunnyvale. I've been here for about 5 years. 5 years ago, when I was maybe 3 or 4 months into my job, my boss, the city manager, was out of town. And so as assistant city manager, so I was acting city manager for the very first time. And I think it was I don't know, Wednesday afternoon at 6 p.m. I get a call from the police chief. Never a good thing when you're acting city manager to get a call from your police chief. And we'd had an incident earlier in the week where some pedestrians were run over at a sidewalk. And so we were trying to figure out what happened and, trying to support, those folks. And the police chief was calling to inform me that that was actually intentional, that the person who ran them over did so because he perceived one of the families walking across the sidewalk to be Muslim. And so that was really shocking for our community that really values diversity. It's in, our vision statement, it's in our general plan. It's something that we value deeply as a community. And I think every time some of these incidents happen in a community, we're shocked and we think we never thought it could happen here. And we realized it did happen here, that hate exists everywhere and we can't pretend that it doesn't. And we need to take a proactive role in really taking a look at this and doing some community building, and specifically in this incident, community healing to address this. And so that started a whole path around an initiative called Sunnyvale Unity with our community. And we were literally, the mayor and I were meeting in residents' homes because residents were calling in and saying they wanted to get involved and do something. And it was super sort of grassroots engagement with our community to build this beautiful initiative. And one of our first events, we had close to 300 people. We had an interfaith panel. We started talking about what are the things that we need to do to build community and understanding across divides and differences, to make these, the proclamations that we are making as a city very real and concrete. From then we started being more proactive around addressing issues. So for example, when the anti-Asian hate incidents were starting to rise across the country, we were not immune to that. We have a very large Asian community that was really concerned. And so we started doing things like training around how to respond to hate incidents, bystander training, de-escalation training with our community to really address the things that were happening that were impacting our community members. The other thing that happened was, in 2020, when Black Lives Matter happened, and I'm sure this happens in many communities, we were not immune to those demonstrations. And so we had our largest demonstration in the city's history, which, we're about 160,000 residents, a medium-sized city, but we had 2,000 people show up to our city hall and call for an end to racial injustice. And so that's something that we couldn't ignore. We were already on this path of we need to be more proactive. And this was just another call to action to say, we can't rest on our laurels and our proclamations. We need to be proactive. And so we made 3 commitments when that happened. We said, we're going to listen to community concerns. We're going to be more transparent, and we're going to take a look inward so that we take action to root out any systemic racism and inequities that exist in our service delivery and even within our organization. And so we have been on a path of, 2-pronged approach, one internal, really focusing in on our organization and how we're creating an environment that is good for our employees, an equitable environment for our employees, and engaging our employees in that co-creating process to understand the problems, to have them engage in the recommendations for how we might move forward. And so there's some exciting work around there. And then the external piece with our community. And so we've created a Human Relations Commission. We are right now getting an RFP ready to do a community needs assessment to really hone in on what where the issues are that are impacting our community, where those inequities are. We've tried to look at data. We know that we have we're a very integrated community, but we have the north side of our community is lower income and that community has a sense that they're not treated fairly in terms of service delivery compared to our South Sunnyvale area. And so we're really trying to dig into that and see, can we collect data? Do we have stories? Do we, how can we really tackle and engage our community to help them tell us where the issues are? And then with a plan of really co-creating with them so that so we deeply, again, understand where the issues are, that they help us come up with the solutions, and that they're there also to test any solutions that we do want to move forward with so that they actually work. So those are some of the things that we're doing. And I will say, I'm going to give a shout out to GARE, because one of the first things we did is, we didn't have equity experts. I was not considered an expert in DEI. I needed to learn. And so I went to GARE as one of the first places to learn, to get this bigger picture about how, what is this, how do I think about inequities in a bigger framework? And so GARE has excellent training. They have a foundational training that's amazing, that was so helpful in framing why we as local governments in the past helped create inequities and why we're responsible for addressing them. And, the framework around, normalizing, operationalizing, normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing, and just that framework of how you think about doing this equity work is super, super helpful.
Thank you. Yes, normalizing, organizing, optimalizing. So Ryan, when you hear these things with your work with GARE, with Race Forward and GARE, and injecting that framework into strategic plans of organizations, are you are folks approaching you from these organizations based on some major catalytic event that has occurred so that they can get that same injection?
Yeah, I can kind of maybe walk you through the arc of the growth of the GARE network, and just naming that, Race Forward has been a multiracial national organization in the movement for racial justice for 40 years, and mostly working with community-based coalitions and focus on policy change and even some narrative work to really, disrupt some of the harmful narratives that blame individuals for systemic racism. But we take a very systemic approach, right? And we're talking about structural and systemic racism and how it intersects with other forms of oppression, right? We're not exclusive, but we are race explicit. And it wasn't until there was a real clear model for how government could play a role in the racial equity efforts that Race Forward took on what is now like what we call an institutional change approach. And so, I was fortunate enough to be working at the city of Seattle, which provided the Race and Social Justice Initiative as the model for what became the GARE approach, which Jackie just described. It's also I'll come back to this, but it's visualizing, normalizing, organizing, and operationalizing at racial equity, and that's how you get to organizational change within your institution. And the Seattle model, had lasting power over a few. Now we're going close to 2 decades, and so taking it to a network was a natural evolution. In 2015, it was like 2013 and 14. A number of jurisdictions, mostly in the Northwest, a little bit in California, came together and wanted to share best practices, just, become colleagues in this work, get commitments. Oftentimes it comes with like a commitment, a stated commitment, a resolution, executive order, ordinance. But you got to then build out the infrastructure and increase expertise. And that model just expanded rapidly in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump. and then again in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. So you saw these major on-rampings of, so now we're at 450 jurisdictions that have some commitment and some level of infrastructure, whether it's a chief equity officer or an office, or they're using racial equity action plans, they're using racial equity toolkits for decision making. They're putting in these pieces of good governance is what it is. Later, I think we talk about what are the surprises of this work, like that these practices are actually just improved governance overall for everyone. So I'll linger on that a little bit later, but folks enter in for different reasons. Sometimes it's community-led, pressure. Sometimes it's an elected official who really sees the role of government. Sometimes it's just a lot of mid-level staff who have been calling these questions for a long time and have finally organized in a way that they call the question that can't be uncalled. What's the role of government? And then they look for the others, and when they find them through the Garrett Network, we offer this framework of, really name your vision for what racial equity looks like, and do that with community. Define that. Normalize your terms. Get your training, get everyone kind of up to a standard of fluency around what do we mean between equity and equality? What do we mean by institutional versus interpersonal racism? Really getting those terms down. And organize, like create teams that have space and resources to bring up issues of racial equity. Again, equity officers that can like really hold the vision across the whole jurisdiction, although it's not just their job, it's everyone's job. I always say that. And then operationalize it through whether it's an action plan for each department, or using a racial equity toolkit to look at your budget differently, or your HR policies differently, or your community engagement practices, like really making those changes at the level that staff can understand and see that they're going to be successful in making that change. Because there's always early adopters, but there's then most government staff, we're public servants. I was in government for 14 years. I just wanted to make sure that whatever change we were going to make, I was going to be successful in doing that. And so having these tools and this resource really helps folks feel more confident in making that change.
Thank you, Ryan. And for folks that don't know what GARE is Government Alliance on Race and Equity. And there is a link that Ryan just dropped into the chat, so everyone can get some more information on GARE and some of the initiatives that they have to help you on an individual level and for your organizations. Thanks so much, Ryan. So Nancy, Ryan was just talking about some of those, the opportunities, even at the most simple level as an individual. And I know that you're working with folks who, may need some of those, that assistance to really get a good understanding of what the barriers are and what challenges they're facing and how they can overcome those, and then also the organization on how they can help to meet those folks' needs. What has been your experience in your organization with some of those inequities, and what approaches are you taking?
Thank you. Let me see if I can address your question. When I started in working for the city of Mountain View in 2014, my job was to do interpretation and translations and do outreach. Then in 2016, we have the housing crisis. And with that, people started getting engaged and asking questions that I thought that to me, my ignorance. So, okay, I thought that these questions were very simple, very obvious, but were not. So I had a lot of questions, and the same questions always about housing and access to information, more access to information that was more tangible. Then in 2016, they passed Measure B, that was about rent control. And with that, later on, the council approved a planning goal, a strategic goal that was building a community for all. Under that, we had the idea of creating a leadership academy. That was a vehicle, an instrument to gather people in a safe place and talk about how the local government works. It was supposed to be very simple. It was supposed to be a few people. It was just a very minor budget. And suddenly, I started with 34 people the first time in 2017. I have 100% recruitment, 100% retention. And what we did was dedicate time to talk about what your local government is, how it works, and what are the opportunities for the people to transform the system, learning the hidden rules. As a Latina with a heavy accent, being English my second language, imagine it was hard for me at the beginning to work in local government. So I used that information, that experience, and we repackage it, and then the people helped me to construct, to build that by asking their questions. And right now we have done the academy for 7 years now. Right now, and I am in the middle of implementing the academy for the Chinese community. So I have a cohort of 17 people that meet every Wednesday. And we talk about what the local government is, talking about housing, talking about issues like homelessness, talking about issues about how can I give back to the community, but more important, to build a sense of community. I belong here, and I want to know more about, because I want to give back with a lot of other issues, that we have. But this is one of the tools that we created to bring equity, equity to the picture. As one of my participants says, she says, Nancy, I see a beautiful picture with a nice garden and a nice house, and I don't see myself in that picture, and I want to be in that picture, And she always say that to me, and yeah, that's equity, be part of the picture.
What a beautiful way to characterize equity, and bringing it right to injecting it into the organization in a way that everyone can understand. And so with that, I'd like to ask, have you received or experienced any pushback to those efforts that you've been making, or to your organization? I know that the City of Mountain View, that your leadership is very supportive of these initiatives, and it is really looking forward and looking ahead, and to help with these some of these areas where there might be some challenges.
Pushbacks? I don't think so. I think our council is so progressive, and they are our first champion every time we do an academy, and then they can see the ripple effect of the people that graduated throughout the years. One thing that I need to recognize is that the academy is an initiative that takes the entire agency. It's not only me. I had to involve everybody. So it's a lot of work. It takes, like right now, it takes all the departments from the top down, bottom up, because engage everybody. And so, no, I don't think I have any pushback on any of this. I have to be clear about my objective, why I do what I do. And I have a reason very clear. And every time I am checking always my reasons and back up and reflecting how we do what we do, why we do what we do, and is there any changes? The community is always looking, checking what we do and why, and I respond to them, because the graduates are the first one that are very inquisitive and always asking for more.
Thank you. So, Jackie, both Ryan and Nancy have mentioned that, yes, this is something that needs to be done from everyone, from the individual all the way up to the executives, and even the investment of the political stream, who should be taking some kind of piece to help invest in an equitable environment. Have you, as city manager, have you seen folks in your camp, there any pushback, or has there been any challenges in trying to create these equitable efforts?
Yeah, that's so thank you for giving me a promotion. I'm a deputy city manager, so I think it might be different.
Yes.
But yes, I think what was really interesting, and I knew it was coming, everybody was on board with the concept of being a more diverse, equitable, inclusive organization to build belonging. People were on board. It came from our council very strongly. It is equity, access, and inclusion is a council priority. But when it came to actually resourcing the Office of Equity, the level that our equity, access, and inclusion manager would be, the access that they would get, the actual work and reflection that needed to be done, there was a lot of pushback. And specifically, when we went out, one of the first things that we did organizationally was do an internal equity assessment with our employees. And not everything was positive. And that was really hard for our leadership team to digest the critical feedback that we received from our employees. And so, you know, that was challenging to try to work through some of that resistance, even to the data that was being received. Questions about, you know, some folks felt that, you know, it was just the loud voices. And I'm like, it's not the squeaky wheel when over 50% of your employees have participated in this survey. But still, there were questions around that. And it's funny because Ryan mentioned good governance. A lot of what came out of our survey was not like we have an intense racial issue in our organization. We have organizational issues. Just we have issues of good leadership where employees don't feel like they are trusted, have psychological safety, are able to bring up challenging issues without fear of consequences. Those are more of the issues. They don't feel like they're included in issues that impact them. Those are the sorts of things that started coming up, which is just good management and having a good organizational culture. And so it's when the rubber hits the road, that's when things get really challenging. And so again, it's really important to be clear on like the vision that you have for being an equitable organization, for having equitable outcomes for your community, pointing back at the data, and even collecting data. Some of the challenges that we've had is that we know that inequities exist in our community. We can see them. But when people want to push back, they say, well, where are they? Show me the data. And sometimes that data doesn't exist, or we don't have access to it. And so that's part of the challenge and why we're going out to do this community needs assessment, because we need to be able to have the data that backs up the things that are being brought up by our community and the things that we can very clearly see. Like Nancy said, some things are obvious to us, but not to others. And so we need to have that backup with the data. And again, it is really important to have your leadership be on the same page. And sometimes that takes time. It's taking us some time to get everyone on board. I think there is thankfully lots of support from our city council. Our leadership team is getting there. But you know, it's hard to make the sausage.
Yeah, you mentioned that organizational culture and trying to really realistically, not everyone's on the same page, no matter how much you try to impart in your plan. Ryan, you suggested that good governance is absolutely a necessary part of creating an equitable environment. And it has to be done in a way strategically so that everyone uh, is somehow part of this plan. Um, have you, in your experience working with organizations, experienced what would be a pushback to your efforts in helping the organization, and or even to the good governance?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in, in the long arc of things, we're definitely in a period of pushback. I mean, I'll share an article here about the affirmative action decision by the Supreme Court put a big chilling effect on folks. But this is a time to double down, and we talk about race-informed decision making and policy that you may not be explicit in your implementation, but in the way in which you design your programs and implement that, you can actually be quite race explicit. But you may be using proxies, right, in the actual delivery. So there are ways through what has been this kind of chilling effect from the SCOTUS decision. But we're seeing it even, amongst jurisdictions who are in their like second or third generation of this work. They've really built out a solid organizational infrastructure that they are able to kind of inoculate themselves from this pushback because they have such a broad infrastructure and commitment. Like once you kind of we talk about getting so many people on the rug, you can't yank it out from under you, right? There's so many people standing and they're organized and they have the data and they have the relationships with community, which is key. Like, so I'm a big proponent of those equity assessments that kind of help to then for your organization to then help design an action plan, but to do that with communities most impacted, right, by systemic racism, that they can be a part of that conversation, because that outside visibility really helps to maintain focus on the work, even when there's pushback. So that's one of the things we've seen as a strategy to kind of create that lasting effect, and also managing up through leadership turns over, right? And so doing recommitments to racial equity initiatives, whether that's, again, new resolutions, new executive orders, new, statements that kind of continue to kind of raise the standard for what, and the expectations for what racial equity approaches in government look like, and where the focus is definitely those kind of mandates are extremely important. Yeah, I won't say anything more about the organizing piece, but I think that infrastructure, those teams, those positions, we can talk a little bit more about workforce, but they're really critical to kind of keeping that that flame lit, even in the face of pushback.
So you have this fantastic bird's eye view of what the data looks like. And so what has been the most surprising to you? I know you've worked with organizations all throughout the United States. Is there anything that has stuck out for you in terms of the data?
Yeah, I would say, we measure things at two levels, right? There's like the results in the community that you see, like the disparities in name your issue, right? Whether it's employment or poverty or evictions and housing. I mean, there's, you kind of measure that in the community, and then there's government's role in kind of moving the needle there, and the performance measures as the other level, the things you can take credit for or take blame for, right? In your programs and your funding, um, and when we see folks get really clear about their performance measures headed toward the community results, we've just seen transformations of programs that would just work better for everyone. And that's we call it targeted universalism, right? You have this universal goal to have better governance for everybody, but you need to target some of your focus for communities that it's really not, it's working the worst for, right? But that results in these better outcomes for all. And the example I'll give is when we talk often about complaint-based systems and how they don't work well for anyone. They do work a little better for some. The squeaky wheel, the people who feel comfortable making that phone call, who don't have the language access barrier, who don't fear government, like, and they're, disproportionately whiter, um, and again, feel comfortable. So the example we use is the street lights this is a Seattle example where actually it was the mayor who identified that in South Seattle, which is much more diverse, racially diverse and economically, that the streetlights, he went on a tour and saw that streetlights were just out in a way that was like, why are there so many out? And it was because it was a complaint-based system where folks didn't feel comfortable calling in the streetlight repair. And they found out that, like, well, actually, you can predict when streetlights are going to go out. And so you don't need to rely on people to call. You can just have a standard, replacement schedule. And when they did that, of course, lights improved drastically. Also, some of the hotspots for crime were better lit, and you saw crime reduction. And then also in North Seattle, where folks had been fine calling in to get streetlights replaced, folks reported that, like, they didn't actually want to make those phone calls. They much prefer a more regular light replacement pattern. So it actually worked better for everyone. You saw lights, and for the maintenance folks too, who could see a predictable pattern of maintenance. And so you just saw, like, better governance, better service delivery, and then better outcomes in a way, just by looking at and by questioning this underlying system of complaint base that just required a little bit of an equity lens and someone to call the question.
It's amazing how the community's culture really frames the opportunities for creating some of those the opportunities within the organization. So taking a look outside and then turning that inwardly sounds like it's a really important aspect of addressing some of these inequities. Nancy, what has been most surprising to you about your work and the things that you have experienced?
Surprising. Okay. Surprising me. How can I say this? I thought that we would be doing the academy only one time because it was something that was needed back then. And suddenly the academy has become an instrument for the city. It's part of our culture. And everybody, all staff know about that, why it's coming. And I think I will say, yeah, it's a good surprise because we worked very hard at the beginning to set everything up. It was really it was new. We needed to check about childcare, about a lot of logistics, a lot of things. So now the academy becomes part of who we are, and it creates help us to create the same language, like Ryan mentioned about that we need to create a common language, and the academy has helped us with that. One nice surprise I have is how the Chinese Academy that we have worked the community that we have worked so hard to engage the Chinese community and bring them to meetings. Now with the academy, it's like we open a door. They are so interested, and we are learning so much about their culture, about their struggles in this country, and that really is a nice surprise. Last night, we had a session when they had to talk about who they are and how their history as individual shape who they are as leaders. And some people were very afraid and called me, Nancy, how can I say that? Because, I am from Taiwan and some people are from the mainland. And then how can I talk about my life and my story without offending anybody? So I never had a problem before because I was working with the community. I know that we all share the same values, more or less. And here I am researching, how can I say my story? And then our story, no? And all be together as a community. So to me, it's a nice surprise because we're all learning together. Second, the community is so engaged and so motivated to learn and be part of the city. And also because they want to be when I was interviewing them, one person says, I want to increase the sense of belonging within the Chinese community because I want to belong to this town. And to me, that was a common language, you know? It was like, it brought tears to my eyes because it was, if I want to do something at the end of the day, is that to increase the sense of belonging for people that don't speak the same language, that speak with an accent, that don't understand how the system works because they come from different systems where politics are different, you know? And if they can achieve that and for one moment feel that the council can listen to them, that in this place you have an opportunity to actually express your opinion, even though your opinion is different than the people that has the power. That is a success to me.
That's wonderful and very motivating. I find that especially when there are folks who are just learning what the culture and the values are of the organization, sometimes it's really hard to champion them to get on board, right? And it sounds like you and your organization are really making that happen. And I know, Jackie, you've got more stories to tell about championing and motivating your organization and your workforce to increase that that same feeling sense of culture. What kinds of things are you doing in your organization to help increase the diversity across the board? You know, Nancy had mentioned about language barriers, about racial and ethnic differences, and some of the challenges that posed in the community even. And so what about you?
All right, I'll start. I mean, I mentioned we have internal strategies and external strategies. So internally, we went through a process where after we got the results of our internal equity assessment, we put a call out to employees. There were 4 big themes that came out: organizational culture, employee life cycle, which is, you know, hiring, promoting, that sort of thing, internal communication, and then othering and harm prevention. Those are the 4 big themes that came out of our assessment. So we put out a call and we asked employees, hey, do you want to help us think more deeply about these issues, understand them on a deeper level, and make recommendations for how we might start to tackle issues in these areas? And so we had 44 employees say that they wanted to participate in a subcommittee. They represented all of our departments. They met for a period of 5 months and they came up with 14 different recommendations that then we made our executive team uncomfortable because they weren't the ones deciding on what the priority was going to be. They had to do that with these subcommittee members. So together, we prioritized those 14 recommendations, and we're moving forward with the top 3, which is improving internal communications. We are looking at a skills-based hiring approach to hiring. And so really removing some of the artificial barriers that people have related to minimum requirements in the hiring or promotional process, and really looking at skills and experience. So that's exciting. And then the third one is around trust and psychological safety. And so we've taken those recommendations and we've started to do some strategy around that with skills-based hiring. Our HR team is really, they're doing 20 hours of training around skills-based hiring, and they're starting to look at their practices and really making some changes to align with that approach. For trust-based culture, we actually just had a retreat with our executive team and brought in a consultant to really help us understand what that means. And really frame it for us, and really get us as an executive team to have that trust and psychological safety with each other before we learn how to create that environment on our teams and in the city. So that's exciting. And the one that I'm most excited about is actually around communications, because we're actually, we're going to be using people-centered design strategies to tackle this one. So we're actually partnered up with a consultant that's going to do an innovation learning lab with us that really centers equity. So it's a way for us to have a framework for how to problem solve using innovation strategies that have people at the heart of it, and equity strategies at the heart of it. And one of the reasons that we're doing that is because we want our employees to create the solutions for us. That co-creating process is so important, but also we want to train employees on how to use those strategies so then they can use them as they do their work externally with our community. So right now I am gearing up to have a cohort of 25 to 30 employees participate in this learning cohort and learn these really amazing strategies. I personally went through a Bloomberg Harvard innovation training that was super powerful in helping me, realize that co-creation is really at the heart of equity, but like how to actually implement that, how to do it. So I'm super excited about giving that opportunity. It's an opportunity for professional development for our employees, to teach them these innovation strategies using an equity lens, and then to have them go out and start using these tools in their work. With our community, we have, like I said, we've done tons of training, mostly focused on addressing issues that have come up in terms of, I talked about a little bit about anti-Asian hate when the war between Israel and Gaza broke out. We did do a session around Islamophobia and anti-Semitism, which is a pretty hot topic. And we're not afraid to get in there, even though it's a delicate topic, and we try to treat it delicately, but we're trying to be really proactive in addressing some of those issues. And we're doing other things. So in terms of language access, I know Nancy talked about that. We actually have on our Human Relations Commission a monolingual Spanish speaker who is a commissioner. And so we were faced with this challenge. Oh, we're going to have to hire 2 translators for every meeting. That's going to be really expensive. And we wanted to have a good experience, because sometimes with translators, you have a pause and there's some delay, and it kind of changes the flow of the conversation. And so we started piloting an AI translation tool that simultaneously translates as somebody is speaking, to help with that flow of the conversation. So we're piloting that. We're using that as a pilot, and of course supplementing with translation services. And we're just about to release our language access plan that really thinks through the types of materials and things that need to be translated for our community. So we're doing some really concrete things as well. I've been talking, Ryan mentioned complaint-based systems, and I've been talking a lot to our public works staff, our environmental services staff about that. And that's certainly an area that I want to dig more into.
Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned, there was a whole lot there that you mentioned, but what I really loved hearing was how you are really passionate about getting your management team really invested. And so then it flows up and it flows down and it flows out to the community, which is wonderful. I wanted to take the time to invite our viewers to ask any questions if you have them in our Q&A window in our feature there, so that our panelists can answer those questions for you. And I also wanted to note that Ryan put some really great links in the chat an article and a link so that you can get some more information, gain some more information about the resources that that GARE is providing. And so going to Ryan. So as we close out, what kind of advice, what is the best piece of advice that you would offer for either the organizations or the management in those organizations that want to take a really good active role in repairing these inequities in their agencies? I know, Jackie is well on the way. It sounds like she's, placed a really great process. What kinds of things can you offer to our folks who are here watching today?
Well, one thing I'll note that Nancy has an asset she has is this relationship with community, right? And I heard Jackie also say the internal work and the external work, like having that relationship will accelerate and support your work. Hands down. That if you can do anything, it is to find folks in your community in the issue area that you are working on who are bringing a racial justice lens to their work, and developing relationships with them in whatever way that looks like to you. That is a great way to start. Internally, I mean, as you know, I think middle management can be has a lot of discretion, a lot of positional power, and can be gatekeepers of the status quo. They have a lot of incentive to do so because you usually get paid pretty well in middle. I mean, I was a middle manager for community development for 14 years, and it pays well, and you have a lot of incentive to kind of maintain that. Or it can be a very strategic place for like what we call like adaptive leadership. Like these issues are tricky, and so navigating the change process. I mean, I heard Jackie say like 5 or 6 things that are like the secret sauce to organizational change, right? Like the trust building and the innovation and the learning, kind of creating that space for your team to call those questions and to make that part of their professional development and a learning opportunity. I think that is, that those are some of the leadership qualities, and also continuing and practicing and becoming fluent in describing not just the urgency of the work, but like its alignment, how achieving equitable outcomes is aligned with your existing mission, like going back to good governance. And then your earlier question around workforce, obviously management has a lot of power over hiring and retention and promotion, mentorship and whatnot. And so not just looking at diversity, but like the equity component of that, where the knowledge, we train a lot on like knowledge to get the knowledge, skills, and abilities, right? Those KSAs around equity. And we don't necessarily see those competencies that we train for show up in the job descriptions. They don't show up in the annual work plan review, or they don't show up in the promotion, review. But those are those same competencies. And it's not just whether you come from, you will then make a more diverse workforce. It's whether you come with some like an equity analysis. You come with an ability to see benefits and burdens. You can disaggregate data. You can, call questions around some of the root causes that we see in our community and how they show up in your work. So those kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities can be professionalized and then show up in your, managers can put them to the discretion they have in those job descriptions, in those questions for mid-year review and promotions. And then people see that they're going to get rewarded for that. Like that's a good thing. And that is something that any manager can start to do. And one of the resources I shared is on hiring, and some of that same language can show up in contracting too, in terms of government's expectation about their external partners for implementation. What, do you external partners also have, the knowledge, skills, and abilities to, deliver services more equitably? So those are just some of the middle management practices you can start to do. It's always better if you don't do it alone, and you have a network of peers that are, you're all going shoulder to shoulder, kind of stepping forward together. But that is a couple first steps, just to name a few.
Thank you. Those are great. I actually see a couple of questions, one in our chat, one in our question and answer. And so, Nancy, I'm actually going to ask you this one, since you work with a lot of groups where, people come together, have the same interest, the same purpose, the same goal. How do you see those affinity groups playing a role in repairing some of these inequities? We have someone in the chat who's asked that question.
In the city of Mountain View, some of the groups that have been part of the graduated from the academy, they have created their own groups. Like, for instance, we have a group called Fondo de Solidaridad, or the Solidarity Fund. They were able to get $1 million from the council to give money back during the COVID. And right now, they are getting training they are going to all these organizations, and they are getting training how they can how can they buy their own piece of land so they can manage their own housing. And this is the 6 women that graduated from the academy. They got together, and they have taken this project, this vision in their hands, and they're taking off. I have another group that are now part of Promotoras, and they are the movers and shakers in the community, doing their own thing, separated from the city. They saw a problem, and they want to solve the problem. One thing also that this group is helping is because they now are more knowledgeable, and they share a common language about how a local institution works. They are an instrument to share information with people that don't have the same access. And talking about language access, if you are providing information in English and they don't understand English, it's going to be very hard that they can move to an action that had to do with understanding the real issue. So this group, 133 ambassadors, are all over the place in Mountain View. They go to places that I will never go. They speak the language of the community. Even though we speak the same language, doesn't matter. They speak the language of the community. They are the front line. They are the people that tell me, say, Nancy, you sent a survey, we don't understand it. We don't have access to it. So talking about social media and technology, we do a lot of stuff in social media. We use a lot of technology, but not all the communities are ready. Not all the communities are there. And the most vulnerable people, the most vulnerable families don't have access to that, and they're out. We automatically are putting them back in another area, in another place, no? So the people that graduate from the academy, the ambassadors, we have the opportunity to provide, through somebody's funding, laptop. And the main leadership of the people graduated from the academy had their own laptop, because during COVID, that's how they connected to each other. And they help us to reach out to people that couldn't. So they have developed these skills. And with that, they can reach out to many other people. And they inform me, they inform the community, they inform the city when we're doing something that is not working, And they say, this is not working. We need to change the way you're mentioning this, or we need to change the way that you are expressing this issue, or we don't understand what you're saying. So it's like a thermometer in the community. That's what they are. They are telling us when something is going wrong that we need to change. Otherwise, maybe we will not know, because we don't live in the community. Many of the people that work in the city don't live in other cities. So we don't know when a sidewalk is not working, when a light is not working, when a tree fall and in the middle of the night, or when other issues they have. For instance, a group of women ambassadors help the department, one of the departments, because the street, Latham in Mountain View, had a lot of traffic, and it was very dangerous for the families and the children. So this group of women organized, got the signature for the 200 signatures that they needed for the city to move on building, on doing something for a tree light. And because of them, that organized and went door to door, they were able to get the signatures that we needed. And these were, it was ambassador, graduate from the academy that they knew that they needed to contribute, that they needed to push, and they had the power to do that. So I think this is a good example of how, they did it. And then when we didn't do it on time, they called me, Nancy, it's already 3 months and we haven't seen any results. They said, it's going from our council now. Just give us a break. It's coming. But this is like a great opportunity. I will say.
Beautiful. I love that you have ambassadors that are able to champion looking at those systemic inequities, looking at making some changes in your organizations. All of you, I am deeply appreciative for your time with us today, for the efforts that you are placing in your organizations and on those on behalf of others. And looking forward to seeing what some of those results are that come out of your organizations in terms of making systemic change and preventing inequities in our public organizations. Again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your dedication to this work. And we hope to have you all on again. Thank you, viewers, for watching and participating. And we will see you at our next panel session for Regional Government Services.
Thank you.